I'm just cooking at the moment, so I'll just put you up into the roof.
You never know when I'm going to be calling you, do you?
No. But if I have 5 more minutes, I'll be with you.
Right, that's all right. You go and take your 5 minutes while I sort myself out. We weren't ready for this.
Max, no, we weren't ready for this.
No, we weren't ready, but exciting things are happening. And I just had to open up right away and get on here so we can get the hottest news. The hottest news. Now, right, Maxine, right, you can't hear. We've got. All right, I'm Kate Frost on the live, and the ones that you can't see but you can hear, you can hear them. We've got Jodie, got Diane, got Maxine. We've got me, Kate Frost, and we're called the Oreo team. It's the Oreo team, and we're going after all these horrible politicians in the Commonwealth that have been trying to take down our Commonwealth and not following the rules of the 1688 Bill of Rights and governing us in the way that they're supposed to. I tell you, you get a hold of that 1688 Bill of Rights, and by golly, if you really go through it, it's got restrictions on the Queen, it's got restrictions on the Parliament, it's got a parliamentary sovereignty only exists. So they rave on that they've got parliamentary sovereignty, but parliamentary sovereignty only exists if they it only exists if they follow the oath of office. What they've done in our countries, in England, Australia, and New Zealand and Scotland and Ireland, our 5 Commonwealth countries, they're bringing down the Commonwealth, and that's what they're doing. And they're trying to get rid of the 1688 Bill of Rights. It binds kings, queens, parliamentarians, all of that, and they're trying to get rid of it. What they've done in our parliaments, if they brought in this human rights, which is repugnant to our 1688 Bill of Rights, and you might say to yourself, well, why is the human rights repugnant to the 1688 indubitable rights? Why are the inalienable rights of America repugnant to our Commonwealth common law indubitable right? It's a written law. The common law is a written law. Why is it repugnant? Well, the fact of the matter is that the laws that are made in the United Nations, they're not made by Parliament. You see, you vote your Parliament in, and that's where they get their power from. And in the Cabinet Manual, they've got the 1688 Bill of Rights. And in that 1688 Bill of Rights, it doesn't say to them that you have parliamentary sovereignty and you can do what you freaking like in there. It doesn't say that. What it says is you are permitted to govern in this Parliament if you follow these rules. And then if they don't, see, the Queen's got to follow rules, the Parliament's got to follow rules, the people have got to follow rules, and it's all in there in that 1688 Bill of Rights telling everybody what they need to do. Now, the United Nations doesn't have this. And what they've done, why you're having so much trouble in your countries, is because in the Cabinet Manual, they've put in this human rights, and the 1688 Bill of Rights is still sitting there, and they've got 2 powers that they can use. And I'm telling you, one is repugnant to the other, because the human rights that are made in the United Nations are not, we have no say in what they put in it. And so they can put in anything they like in there, and then they've called it I've been reading all the laws. They've been calling this a bridging technique. They bridge on all these United Nations laws onto our 1688 indubitable right, where when they want us to follow all the rules and do all the things that they want us to do, they function within that 1688 indubitable right, where everybody's accountable. That's where they get their parliamentary sovereignty from. That's where they get their judicial sovereignty, their judicial power. That's where they get their kingly powers from that. And they have to swear an oath, all right? But when they want to do all this crap that they're doing, they kind of slip out of there and they go into this one that they've bridged on. And in that one, they can do what they freaking like. And then when you're trying to prosecute, they say, well, I'm under that and that's my right. Well, what we've been trying to get into the courts with this 1688 Bill of Rights, but so far they're blocking us and they're trying not to let us. But we're going back for another go, so we haven't given up. I'm working on it every day for years all. But what does it mean, parliamentary sovereignty? Parliamentary sovereignty doesn't mean that they can act as dictators. It doesn't mean that they can just go in there and rule you any old way they like. If you go to the 1688, it will tell them all the things that they need to do if they want to govern you. And then what does it tell you? It tells you that when they don't govern you according to these rules, when they don't uphold their oath to you, it's no different from when you got a company, right? You open up a company and you employ people and you're paying them. You have a contract with them and you say to them, right, I'm going to pay your money and you're going to work for me. And these are the things that I, as the employer, have to do in order to have you come and work for me. And they have to govern you in a certain way. And once that employer goes outside of those restrictions that he or she has, then they lose their rights and they go to court and they go to prison. It's no different in Parliament. They have a contract to us. And when they break that contract, what does it say that they have to do? Well, when they break that contract, the power of Parliament no longer rests in the Parliament. The power of Parliament is then removed from them and then it's put into the courts. And then the courts are allowed to take over their power. Now, they're all checking up. This is the separation of powers, you see. It didn't mean just separation of powers and the courts will deal with all the criminals and do all the things that Parliament order us to do for all the peasant people, and Parliament can do anything they like for themselves. No, it doesn't say that. It says that when you in the Parliament don't uphold your oath, you don't follow all these rules, then the means of redress is for the people to come and petition the court, which is our right, against the Parliament. They lose their parliamentary sovereignty. And so the courts are trying to say, you can't bring this prosecution against the Parliament because they've got all these acts that they're making and all these subordinate laws. And the courts are saying, we can't help you because they've got parliamentary sovereignty because you voted them in. No, they don't have parliamentary sovereignty because we voted them in. No, we voted them in with a contract that they had to follow, and when they break the contract and they don't follow the contract, which is to govern us in a certain way, then they lose their sovereignty. They may be in power, but they no longer own their parliamentary sovereignty. That is gone out the window. It's no different that when I was a child, who doesn't remember when they were a child? This is what I was always taught when I was a child, is that when somebody beats you up, somebody confines you in a place where you don't want to be confined, somebody kidnaps you, somebody tortures you or forces you to do things that you don't want to do, they lose their right. They don't have any more rights. Once in this world, in the common law, in the rule of law, in the rule of the world, in the rule of God, once somebody hurts you, hurts another person or damages another person, they lose their right for a certain amount of time. It doesn't always have to be forever, but for a certain amount of time, they don't get the same rights as what everybody else does. And that's because they violated another person's rights. So that's and it's the same in the Parliament. They don't just, rights are not automatic. They've got to earn them. Now, what we've been hearing in the Parliament in New Zealand is that we did take our case to court, and we did take the Prime Minister to court, and we took a man called Chris Barfoy to court. So I went to court for Jacinda Ardern, and I went to court for Ashley Bloomfield, and I went to court for, what's his name? Somebody, Andrew Little, and I went to court against another person called Chris Barfoy. When I went to court, I didn't accuse them of anything. What I did is I went to court and I asked for a declaration. I said in this declaration that they are not upholding the oath. And I've said in my declaration that I've said they've got two sets of rights in our cabinet manual. One set of rights is the 1990 Bill of Rights and the human rights, and one set of rights is our indubitable right. And I said in regards to the 1990 Bill of Rights and the human rights of the United Nations, Parliament is upholding their duty. But I said in regards to our 1688 indubitable rights of free speech, the Protestants' rights to arm themselves as allowed by law. We'll talk about that in a minute. In regards to those things, I've said, and in regards to forfeiture of person without conviction, forfeiture of person without conviction is when they lock you in your country, they lock you in your house, they lock you in anywhere, and they say that you can't go out and there's been no conviction against you. That's forfeiture of person without conviction. When they stop you from entering your country of birth, that's forfeiture of person without conviction. Your country belongs to you by your birth. And if they prevent you from coming back to it because they said you're sick and we're not letting you back in this country, that's a forfeiture of person without conviction. When they say to you that you're not allowed to speak against them or any of those things, that's stopping your freedom of speech. And all of these also comes under those is an overall law, a very, very special law that we have a right, the Protestants have the right to have their arms as allowed by law. Now, everybody thinks that's guns, but this is not true. The arms that we are permitted to have as allowed by laws is that we're permitted to go to the High Court and we're permitted to get a declaration against armies, against navies, against bosses, against parliamentarians, against queens, against priests. We're allowed to go and get that as allowed by law when they're not upholding their oath. And so that is when the court, so we went to the court for these, I went to the court against these people saying they weren't upholding their oath, and the court rejected me. They striked me out. And what they basically said is that when they don't allow you to get these declarations, then they are removing your arms of protecting yourself in law. And that is against the 1688 Bill of Indubitable Rights, the Will and Mary from England. So nobody's been going to the court to get this declaration. I'm encouraging everybody to try and get in there, but we're still doing it. But when we get it, we're going to be going up. So since we did that, so that's why this 1688 Bill of Rights is so important to you, because all the other rights in the entire world, none of them put restrictions on queens, popes, kings, parliaments, governor-generals, police, armies, courts. No other declaration, no other rights does that in the entire world except for this one 1688 Will and Mary indubitable rights is the only one in the world, in the entire world, that does that. And that's why they want it gone. That is why. And so we have noticed, we have been told, now the girls are going to be talking. I'm going to let the girls talk now. We have heard, who is it that we've heard that's jumping the ship and jumping countries? Who's going to talk
Chris
to me?
Farford, for one.
Well, we have heard this guy here, Chris Farfoy. So he was part of my claim. We have heard, now, we don't know if it's only gossip or not, but we have heard that, okay, more news. One of our people that was fighting against all of this and had been warning us all against all of this, and he'd said, your countries are being sold from under you, all your rights are gone, you have no rights, they are doing all this, was a man called Richard Proser. Now, he has suddenly turned up, passed away, bless him. He suddenly turned up, passed away in England. We're very sad about that. I'll say it. And it may be that Chris Farfoy is going to England It might be that he's not stepping down, everyone. It might be that he's going to England to cover up all of everything and make sure that nothing gets out that he doesn't want to get out. Because we're all suspicious, actually. So, and although we can't say that he has gone to England, is presently only rumour. Okay, so it's a rumour. It stands to reason. Oh, look, yes, Richard Proser, the New Zealand First MP. I should have recorded this. Hang on, I'll record it.
This meeting is being recorded.
Right, so Richard Proser, he was a New Zealand First MP, and he was working over in England, all right? And there's been a couple of reports come out, because most reports have just come out that he's passed away at 55 years old, but a couple of reports have come out that he was depressed. But this is the second death that we've had in England that is an apparent suicide by people that were journalists. How many is it now, Jodie? Can't hear you, dear.
I was just perhaps doing the flick sign.
Oh. Okay.
Flicking them off.
Yes, flicking them off. Okay, so we've had, well, I know of two. We had one very young man who died about a year ago, and he was accused of being suicide. And then later they said, because his girlfriend said, no way. And this man was fit, he was healthy, he was strong, and the girlfriend said no. And so they changed the ruling from suicide to death unknown. And it might be the case here with Richard Proser. Now, I'm going to read, because somebody did send to me what Richard Proser had said. So I'll read it out to you. I haven't got a picture of Richard Proser, but you can go ahead and just Google the name. His name is Richard Proser. Okay. Now, just before he died, everyone will have to be patient, because there's a lot of information coming in and I'm trying to keep up with it all. Where is it? Because Sharon has sent me a little note. Well, maybe not her, but somebody sent me. Yes, it's coming. Somebody's died.
I think I sent it to you, Kate.
Was it Joe? Yes, Jodie sent it to me. So
just be aware there is something that came out from his wife to talk about his depression.
Oh, there is. Okay, so apparently there's something that's come out.
Aware of his depression.
Just because
she said it was known literally or something. So more or less like she didn't really know that he was depressed.
No.
All right.
And here it says dies suddenly. So it's a dies suddenly here.
Everywhere said that he died suddenly, but there's one or two reports that they didn't say that he died from topping himself, but they said that he died and he was depressed. But apparently his wife has come out and said, no, he's not. But have a listen here. I'll read it to you. It says that this is what he wrote from England. So he was in England. Now this man's been in England, and New Zealand is under British law, and and the common law said our countries are run by common law. America is not run by common law, and they're trying to get us all under the inalienable rights of that kind of thing, and they're trying to get rid of our common law, and we must protect our common law. Our common law is in the 1688 Will and Mary rights. Now, Richard Proser, it says here, dear New Zealand, while you remain asleep, scornful and credulous, your nation is being stolen and sold out from under you. Yes, it is, he says, and this is the fact. No, this isn't conspiracy rubbish. It's true and it's happening, and I'm here to tell you, I've been talking to people in New Zealand every day, and they're telling me they're in deep trouble. So is England, so is Australia, so is Scotland, so is Ireland. Yes, the government is lying to you. Yes, the opposition is in bed with them. Yes, the media are in on the act as well. everything you are being told through every official and officially sanctioned channel is a lie. Yes, it is. This is a guy working in Parliament. I have told you so. Oh, hi, Norm. There's Norm come in. Hi, Norm. I have told you. So at every opportunity and every step along the way, and so far I've been 100% right, which is pretty good even for me. Accuse me of blowing my own trumpet if you like. I don't really care. It does sadden me to see from afar what is happening in my own homeland, and that's saddening me. I'm over here in another country fighting for New Zealand. The people in New Zealand, now this is, I'm shit you not when I tell you, the people in the New Zealand are going to file cases in the court, and before they even file the case, the first thing they file for is name suppression. And when the judges ask them why they want their name suppression and ask them to prove why they need to have that name suppression, they are saying that they're scared. They're saying that they're being threatened, and that they're saying that they're scared of the police. They're scared of they're scared of the government, and they're scared of the police, and they're terrified. This is what they're saying in New Zealand. They're saying it in Australia too. And so before anyone will ever get their case even into the court against the government, they have to get their name suppression. And I'm over here in another country, and I'm lucky. I'm speaking out for the New Zealanders, because if you're a New Zealander, if you're an Australian and you're living over in England, if you're an Englishman and you're over in Australia, what we've got to do is speak out for our countries when we're not inside our countries, so that we can protect our countries, because they can't speak at the moment. A lot of them can't even speak because they're so scared. So this is a terrible thing that's going on. So he said it's happening under the very noses of the very people to whom it's happening, who continue to not believe even while they are experiencing it. But personally, I'm not affected by the scorn. I'm like that too. I'm strong. I'm not affected. I've always been a seer. I've lived my entire life subject to ridicule because of that. Yeah, Kate Floss too. Yeah, you know. But here I am being right again. There is no pleasure in that. Here's what you can look forward to in the short to medium future. Although I disagree with him on this point. He's saying China will come. But what I reckon is that there's been a deal made. I reckon there's been a deal made with our Commonwealth countries, and they've decided to set up two governments. They've got one government for the Anglo people that have got the history back to England and Europe and the subject status, and they've decided they've removed all of our native people from their subject status. They've put them under these dubious United Nations rights, and then because of that, the governments and the police and the courts are able to operate between two systems. And one system, they're not restricted, and one system, they are restricted. Now, when they originally started doing that, because they said that the Indigenous people or the brown people should not be forced to be subjects of the Queen if they didn't want to. When they first started doing it, it worked out quite well because they used their extra powers sparingly. But, you know, whenever mankind is ever given power, do you know what? Mankind can't be trusted. They go crazy with their newfound power. And what you're seeing today is that whereas they restricted themselves when they first gave them the system of being able to jump between powers, one restricted and one unrestricted, when they first did that, they all acted in a reasonable way. But as time has progressed, they have wanted to break free further and further and further. And now we're at the point where they're like, you know what? We're just going to do what we like because nobody's saying anything. Nobody's going to court and demanding their indubitable will and merry rights. Nobody's protesting about it. So they said, why we want to be in that one that restricts Parliament, restricts court, when we can be in this human rights one and we can do basically anything we want to because there's no restrictions, and that's the bridge. So they're staying more and more on the other side of the bridge. If you can think of it of the restricted rights and the unrestricted dictator power. And when they started out, it's just like the three little goats, isn't it? It's tippity tap across the bridge, and tippity tap back to the restricted. But they started spending more and more time over on the other side when it was supposed to be used rarely for very, just for some purposes, but not for everything. And they've gone mad on it. Check out his very last video here. I've got this from, Jodie's holding up his picture, and but you can't see it on YouTube, but it says, it says free Assange. Check out his very last video appearance. The last question he answered, he called out the technocracy, smart dust, and nanotech disaster waiting to happen back in 2018. And then they gagged him. See, we all got to get talking. That is exactly what is happening. Now, what they've done with our native people in Australia and New Zealand, our native people own states. If you think of the Vatican State, right? You've got the Vatican State where it's got its own laws, and you've got Utah State. And all the land in both of those states sits in the leader of the church. It's not with the people, it sits in the leader of the church. Now, our people in Australia and New Zealand, even over in England, there are certain areas, in Scotland, in Ireland, in Wales, in our country, certain areas are protected states. And those states are owned by the native people. And these evil people have encouraged the native people to leave their protections, go into these United Nations laws, and the United Nations have gotten them under the AI digital system to go in a 50% partnership with them. Is once they're doing that, these evil people are able to move into our countries, move a large group of people, because they're giving money and shiny things to the native people. They're giving them shiny things and lots of things. And the native people are just thinking, and they're not thinking anything of it. What these evil people do is move their groups onto these native states. And we've already found the information. These native states can be declared independent states within the country. Once they do that, they then can enforce only their laws in that state. So that happens if you get an Islamic religion. If they come to New Zealand and they encourage the natives to sell them one of their states, they move into that state, they rope it off, and then they declare it a state in their own right, an Islamic state within New Zealand, as an Islamic state within England, and so on. So the Israelis are doing it, the Islamists are doing it, China's doing it, America's doing it. And what they're doing is setting up states within our states, in our countries. And Julian Assange, when he's talking about the nanotech, what they did with our native people is they wrote many, many, many laws in secret, signing themselves up to a 50% partnership. Now, in New Zealand, they're calling us two countries now. One country is called Aotearoa, and one of them's called New Zealand. But they're presently in the middle of still trying to separate all the states and set up their own states within the states. So Julian Assange and Richard Prosser and Kate Floss and a few of us, we're aware of this. Now let's get back to Richard Prosser. So he's turned around and said, he's turned around and said, what's he said? Richard Prosser said, China will become the new colonial overlord of New Zealand. New Zealand will become the new Zimbabwe of the Pacific. A few elitist New Zealand Maori, excuse me, and he says, I put that in inverted commas because most of them will be mostly white. Many will have non-Maori names, and none of them will actually represent the true New Zealand Maori or anyone else apart from themselves. They will gain majority control over much of the land, and they're doing it now, and natural resources of New Zealand. New Zealand's a continent now. They will be doing this on behalf of the masters in Peking, as well as for their own. Now, in this area that I do disagree, I'm saying America's in on it. I'm saying America and China, and something's happened with the Majesty. There's been some kind of realignment with us. If you look at the Commonwealth countries, there was 54. We're down to 14, and the very last most important countries that they want to separate are our common law Commonwealth countries. There aren't many common law countries in the world. There really aren't. And so our common law, but we actually have a written common law that protects us to allow us to have common law. Part of the protections of our written common law is that no foreigners can come in and govern within our countries. And they do that so that they could see, if you look at, they do that so that we can have freedom as common law countries, but other people can't come in and take advantage of those common laws and take us over and take over our little states within our country. So that's why we had that. But now that they're starting to remove it, all of, the evil people are moving in. It's no different than what happened in Ukraine. So it's not only China. Don't go blaming China. I believe America's in on it. I'm going to put it out there. I believe Canada is in on it. I believe Israel is in on it. And I also believe some of the Saudi Arabian countries are in on it to take down our strong Commonwealth countries in our common law and get rid of our written common law. I'm just going to throw it out there and say that's what I'm looking at what they're doing. And we've all got to join together as the Commonwealth. So please don't allow the state of affairs to drive a wedge between the real New Zealand Maori and New Zealanders and the real Anglo people that have got a history from the Anglo countries. It's simply divide and rule being applied, and it can only succeed if you pander to it. He's saying food production and distribution will be centrally controlled. Your water will be centralised. You'll need a permit to collect rainwater, which you will have to treat to New Zealand drinking standards. The troops are going to be coming in. Mass immigration. He's saying mass immigration from China. But I'll tell you another thing, what they've been doing. They've been tricking us, because when you go and look at the immigration records, they've flooded New Zealand with 2 million, more than 2 million immigrants. I'm not against immigration. They made a law against speaking against mass immigration. But anyway, what they're doing with can we create our own sovereign? This is what I'm saying. Alex Hills has said to me, can we create our own sovereign state and foil their plans using common law? And he says, I, for one, don't want to pay these idiots tax anymore. What's going to happen is, what happens with countries is, when the countries were created, especially our Commonwealth countries that had common law, all of our countries were all countries, even Germany, England, Scotland, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, the islands, all the peoples on those countries lived in common law. And they didn't they didn't need any laws. They lived peacefully, and they didn't really need even land boundaries or anything. But what had happened is when these the three religions moved into, I'm not against those religions, but they moved into those countries, and what had happened was they started abusing the people that were living in common law. And so what they did was they divided up the country. They made a few areas states that couldn't be touched. And then they made a whole bunch of other areas that were free to people, for people to use. You could buy on them, you could sell on them. And it's that area that worked as a common area. And then as a common area for everyone to use. And then there were certain states that belonged to certain groups, certain tribes that were not in the common area, and they could have their own fixed laws, right? But in the common area, everybody had to live under the common law. And so living under the common law was Protestant law. You couldn't live under complete, absolute Islamic law. You couldn't live under complete, absolute Jewish law, the Torah. You couldn't live under absolute Catholic law, right? But they had a common law, and it was something that everybody from each of those religions could be protected by. And we Protestants that were not in those religions, we could be protected by also. But that's, Alex says, what if we just go and say, I declare my state, this state. So you go and get your town, you get all your townspeople together, you look at your area, the boundaries of your area, you get your townspeople together, and you go in and you all of you, every single person living in that town says, and it's been done. They did a test case in New Zealand in 1985. The government wanted to do something. They had a group of citizens, the whole lot of them, went to the court using their 1688 Bill of Rights. They used their and this is why we need it. This is exactly why we need to keep it. And they declared themselves an independent state. And then the thing that the government wanted to do, they stopped them from doing it. Now, for some reason, they could have stayed as an independent state, but they came back and they removed themselves from that. And I think it's better because your country becomes weak. What happens when you have a complete independent state? It's not controlled by a central government, and it's not controlled by nation status. And in the beginning, it might be good if you've got a very good leader. But if your leader later turns sour and you don't like who your leaders are, if they become, when you have an independent state, if that leader becomes dictatorial and you've separated from your nation status, when they become dictatorial in those lands, when you want to leave, you leave with nothing, because everything is rested in that body that has said that they will be the people responsible for your independent state. So that you can look at the Pope, right? You look at the Pope. He got this small area land. It's like a country within a country. And he said, this is going to be my state. This is going to be my country, right? And there's few people that want to live in there. But everything is rested in the Pope. He owns everything in there. And if somebody's that's living there, if they're not happy, they up and they leave. And they get to take nothing with them, all right? But when you live as a country and anybody can come and go, you can move around all of the states freely. People can come and go. The land that you buy, when you want to leave that state, you can sell your land and you get everything that you put into it, you get it back. And you can go and leave and live in another state. So if you've got a country full of independent states that have got all these restrictions and they become, and then if you get like, well, what happens if you have 3 states, right? What happens if you've got countries and you've got like, maybe 10 people, 10 groups all decided that they were going to have 1 state each, right? So each of them individually doesn't have that much power. But then what happens as time goes on and you get some religious cult moving in there, just a religious cult, I don't want to name anyone, but you get a religious cult that moves in there. Well, what if they then go to the leader of another state and they say, hey, I'm going to give you all these millions of dollars and you let me have your state as well. And then he gets 2 states, you see, because your leader sold it out from under your feet. And then he goes to the next one and then he gets 3 states. Well, then he has a lot of power within the country because he now owns outright 3 independent states that are within your nation. So it's not a good idea for you to do that. What we've got to do is all start using our 1688 Bill of Rights, and what we've got to do is remove the governments are working as independent states, because New Zealand, they've got 2 names, right? Aotearoa and New Zealand. When the government's functioning within Aotearoa, they're not restricted. And when the government's functioning within New Zealand, they're restricted. What we've got to do is restrict this Aotearoa. We've got the Cabinet Manual in England, and they've got 2 rules, 2 sets of rules. Human rights sets of rules, which is unrestricted, unvoted, unelected. And then you've got your 1688 Bill of Rights, Will and Mary, that's restricted. You've got to restrict the first rule. So you go and look at those human rights, and you need to force your parliaments to put restrictions on them. Because we've already got our restrictions that was done 400 years ago. The United Nations is not restricted. It's balanced on the it's balanced on the idea that they're all good people and they will all govern nicely and they will never do anything to be corrupt or steal or rob. That's what the United Nations is based on. Show me the laws where the United Nations is accountable, the Queen's accountable, Parliament's accountable, we're accountable, the courts are accountable, but anything functioning within the United Nations, it's not accountable to us. So we've got to, so anyway, we have heard that Chris Farfoy, I better let someone talk. Who's got news on Chris Farfoy that he's jumped ship? Hello? Woo. They've all left me. Maxine, Diane. Hello? Maxine.
I don't follow it very much, but I just seen a bit of a article saying that what's his name, Mallard will be leaving in August, and I assume Farfoy sometime soon as well.
So we have heard,
which is a good thing, I'm sure.
we have heard that a man called Mallard in our parliament. To be honest, I don't think he's. I don't think he's. Eh?
He held the position of Speaker of the House.
All right, he's Speaker of the House, and he's about to jump ship, apparently. But he's not. He's not the worst of the worst. To be honest, he hasn't really done anything. I don't know what he's done. People say he's done something, but I don't really know that he's done anything. I don't know why everybody's picking on him, but anyway, the people are picking on him, so he's going to be the one to go. He's the fall guy, but I believe in an actual fact of all of them, he's the one that is probably been the most honest. And so I've disagreed with people on that. And what's the? How do we get this news on Chris Farfoy?
New Zealand, One News.
And it's on Stuff.
Aye?
Yep, Stuff, One News. Farfoy wanted to Fafoi wanted to leave in 2000 and something. He wanted to leave then. And Ardern made him stay on. Apparently, one of his kids starts school and he wants to be a family man now. Of course they do, because they've already achieved what they set out to do. Mallard is not honest. Even he was the one that went against Winston Peters for, he trespassed him from Parliament because Winston Peters went down to Parliament to the protesters to talk to them.
He did. Okay, Trevor Mallard is the Speaker of the House in New Zealand. When the protesters were down, Trevor Mallard, one of the ex-prime ministers, went down to talk with the protesters. He didn't do anything wrong. He just went down to talk, but Trevor Mallard trespassed him. Everybody blamed Trevor Mallard, but Trevor Mallard had all the people in Parliament have been restricted by the Prime Minister, and she has ordered them to only do what she tells them to do. She's put New Zealand under emergency rule, and nobody is allowed to fart without her telling them to. And I don't think that Trevor Mallard did that on his own volition. I believe that he was ordered to do that, and he's just I think he had no power.
Idiots.
I do just think that he was ordered by a higher up. In the grand scale of things, Trevor Mallard is very low down on the grand scale of who's pulling the strings in the hierarchy. So, but he got the blame, and nobody seems to see anything wrong with that. But anyway, there are some.
Portia Williams is losing her portfolio for the police commissioner.
Yeah, but if you read the stories, Max, apparently there's another news clipping on Jacinda now holds the strongest cabinet in New Zealand because she buddied up with the Pacifica. She's got all of Pacifica on her side now. And that's why all these people are dropping off. I reckon that's why all these people are dropping off.
Why?
Hipkins is taking the police portfolio.
He's taken.
Yeah.
Who
Got
is?
a degree in criminology.
The Hipkins.
All right, so they're having there's a big cabinet reshuffle, but it's a matter of watching to see who's going where, and so we have to wait and see. But this is all just news happening in New Zealand. So apparently, Poto Williams, who is a Cook Islander, she's been stepped down from the head of the police. Apparently, I'm not sure, Chris Farfoy, who, this guy, Chris Farfoy, was a newspaper, he wasn't even a journalist, he was just in media, and he was appointed Minister of Justice. He was appointed Minister of Justice and Associate Minister of Courts, and Minister of Immigration and Minister of Media. And he was a Pacific Islander from Tokelau who had 4 major portfolios with not an ounce of qualification. And then Poto Williams, who was made the head of police, and she had, I can't remember what was her qualifications, but she had no qualification. She was from the Cook Islands, so that's 2 of them. And then you've got Alpito Williams CO, who's from America. He's from Samoa. I don't know which of the Samoas. He's heading up. He was he is Associate Minister of Associate Minister of Justice, I think it is, and then he's the Minister of Courts. So between the 3 of them, and then he's the Minister of Education. So between the 3 of them, 3 islanders, not even born to New Zealand, have had all the top portfolios. Yes, Jodie.
I just want to say too, Chris Farfoy was very much wrapped up too with the organisation of Mitchell Fan. It's all the AI that's coming to New Zealand.
Oh, that's,
So
yeah,
he's the coordinator of all the companies to.
doing all the digital. And then his brother, and what's his brother's job? His brother is heading up media, and the government decided to give millions of dollars to media, and it's going to all his family. And it's all been shipped out of the country. The country's been taken over, but yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff. So those people are apparently stepping down, but just because they're stepping down, it doesn't mean that that things are going to be better for New Zealand. But they've got the same thing's happening in Australia, by the way. They're putting foreigners in charge of Parliament in Australia. They just swore in two people into Parliament, Australian Parliament, a common law Parliament, was sworn in with a pink Islamic Sharia Bible, with a pink Islamic, but yeah. And the man that got sworn in, he said, I've thrown out the Queen, we're going to be a republic, and we will no longer be under the common law. You're going to be under the inalienable rights, probably from America, I suppose. And he's not even a proper Australian either. His father is Italian. You're not supposed to be in Parliament if you are not born to the country, of two parents born to the country. You have to have two parents born, and this is the standard law. I'm not, people are saying, well, you're racist. This is the standard law all around the world. Now, but just because these people are stepping down, it doesn't mean that things are going to be rosy. You've got to watch when they step down, where are they going?
Okay.
Where, that is the question.
Kate,
Yes, dear.
you know how you said that El Pito is heading up another caucus within Parliament?
Yeah.
That's where they're going. That's where they're going. They're going over to El Pito.
They're already with him, aren't they?
No, that's where they're going to.
So they're still in Parliament.
And I reckon that's where Fafu is going to. That's why I sent the message to say that Jacinda now holds a powerful government because she's aligned herself, or well, they've aligned herself with her within that caucus. So she's strong within that caucus.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because their powers in our parliaments are just become too strong. And what I'm saying is that there's only one way. We've all got to try to get our Will and Mary into the court. So we went in the first round, and I got struck out. But we're going in the second round for the appeal, and we're going to try our very best to get it. Even with all this crap, Ardern said she will win the next election and drag New Zealand along, whether they like it or not. Free New Zealand, latest video by Les Gunn, was told this by a friend. That's from Kiwi Ingrid. It really doesn't matter which party goes into power. That's what Richard Proser was saying. Richard Proser said they are all one and the same. They set the parties up that are going to follow exactly the same policy as the party that you've already got there. But what I can tell you is, under this, if you go to the cabinet manual, and what you'll see in the cabinet manual is two sets of rights. You'll see the New Zealand's 1990 Bill of Rights. England's got the human rights, and Australia's got the human rights, so is Scotland, so is on. Then under that in the cabinet manual, you'll see the 1688 Will and Mary. There's two. Now, what you've got to do is get out the pretended title of the Crown. That is called a pretended title of the crown. Because what they're doing, they're all winged. That's Betty Broford, my house truck. That's a funny name. Betty Broford, my house truck. She says they're all corrupt wings of the same bird. This is exactly true, but you know, we got to get smart people. We got to get smart. They want New Zealand, Australia, our 5 countries. What had happened was in 1837, right? Pre-1837, all the countries were ruled by the kings. And then in 1837, I think it was it Queen Victoria? Queen Victoria took over in 1837. Now, when she did that, in around about, at that time, certain banks were set up and trusts were set up and various things like that. As all of our countries were interconnected, we were bound together in a very special way, our 5 countries, different from America, very different. And the problem was that under our we had a common law that was a written common law, and our written common law gave us too much power because we were able to restrict Parliament a lot. We were able to restrict the courts. We were able to restrict the Queens. The Will and Mary tells us how to remove the Queen. It doesn't matter. Yes, the Betty says the Rothschild running the City of London, but it really doesn't matter. The Will and Mary tells us how to remove Parliament. It tells us how to remove Queens. It tells us how to even go against the courts, and nobody's using it. And so if we don't use it, it's been fallen to the wayside, and they've replaced it with this new inalienable, or this human rights. And now what I was going to say, where am I? Got a bit lost there. So they're functioning between these 2 things, and we need to stop them being able to do that. You should not have. So America has decided to leave the United Nations, and America and Canada both set up special protections for their. See, our natives in our countries own independent states by their tribes. Each tribe owns a state in its own right. And there's never been any houses or nothing ever built them. They're just like God's lands. They really are. And America, America did that with their independent states, but America put protections around all their independent states, and so did Canada. And then America said they were going to join all this to United Nations, and that our countries should join too. They're all telling us to join, all right? And then when we already joined and we all got in deep that we couldn't get out, America pulled out, Canada pulled out, all the Islamic countries wrote their own laws, all the islands wrote their own laws, all the Asian countries wrote their own laws to protect their independent states. But our 5 countries did not write any laws. And so they're trying to bring us down now, and they have flooded our countries with people that are not born to our countries, and that's why we're in so much trouble. But one of the things that they've been doing is they take a large group of immigrants and take them to England, and then they give them very, very fast citizenship into England. And then once they get their British passport, they then send them to New Zealand. And then when they get to, and then so our immigration records looks like we've got people coming from England, when in fact there's an exchange thing. So they do the same in New Zealand. So if they import 100,000 into New Zealand, they give them their passports, their New Zealand passports, and then they send them to England, and it looks like in England that you're getting New Zealand people coming to England, when in fact you're getting 100,000 Islamists, or I won't
It's
say
a legal way of human trafficking, because 2 years ago, this he was Egyptian law professor. He's been here. He was here in 2010 giving law lectures in Auckland. He's been to England. He's been to Ireland, and he's back in the States. And his main lectures, and he's bloody good. He's really good to listen to. So a lot of his lectures are on international law, and he talks consistently about human trafficking across international borders. And I think that is basically what they're doing, the human trafficking.
That's exactly right. It's human trafficking on a mass scale, and I do believe that we are under quite threat, our 5 countries, and our only way out is to join together and start speaking out. But here, what does Betty say? The only way Ardern will win is cheating. Bill Gates' Microsoft is in the vote counting machines. That's how she won the last time. We know that. Thanks, Betty. We know that it really doesn't matter. Even if the parliamentarians don't get in, they've got to back all the groups that they've got set up. I'm not trusting any of them. The only one that I'm trusting is that if they use that 1688 Bill of Rights, the 1688 Bill of Rights says that they have to protect the Protestant laws. They have to protect the Protestants, and part of that is that we're not allowed to have foreigners govern over us. Yes, Betty. Yeah. I've been saying that, Betty. Betty says she's doing it for the votes. They're bringing in not only the votes, these people belong to religious sects, S-E-C-T-S. They belong to religious cults, and these religious cults are cults that pay tithes, T-I-T-H-E-S, tithes. And if the criteria for getting into New Zealand to get your visa and get your automatic residency within a few days of being in New Zealand, they're giving the refugees automatic residence before they even come to New Zealand. And the criteria is that you have been attending a church and been paying your tithes to the church. And in order to get your visa, you have to get a letter from the church to say that you've been paying your tithes. And then that's how you get your visa. And then all these people that are coming to our countries, not only are they doing the votes for them, they're also paying tithes to the church. And the church, certain churches are becoming multi-billion, trillion-dollar empires based on the tithes of the people that they're bringing in to our countries. The Christchurch happening belongs to Ardern. So we have to be a bit careful what we all say, because we don't want to get into trouble. But yes, there's a lot going on, and so you can't just go out doing that. But what can you do? So they in New Zealand, and I know that Australia's got it, and England's got it too, and Scotland's got it too. And that is in the Human Rights Act. You have to go and search for it, and you have to really search hard. But there's a little line in there. Our one in New Zealand says that they will contact with the Prime Minister to make New Zealand bound. This is in the Human Rights Act, Section 5, subsection 2, KII. All right, I'll say that to you again. Human Rights Act, New Zealand, Section 5, Subsection 2 is already there, and scroll down subsection 2 and you'll see KII. Now go and read KII, and it says to report to the Prime Minister on making New Zealand bound to any and every international instrument. So they've put this on as a bridge to our, now under our 1688 Will and Mary Bill of Rights, under that, we vote Parliament in, and they have to make laws that protect us through the 1688, which includes managing immigration, not letting foreigners govern over us, allowing us to have weapons to protect ourselves, including the weapons of the arms of law to protect ourselves, having the right to petition the Queen, having the right to petition the High Court when they encroach on our rights. All of those things are in 1688. And what they're trying to do is, so Parliament is restricted. And the only reason Parliament has sovereignty, they have the sovereignty because they're restricted by this, right? But the Human Rights Act, Section 5, subsection 2, KII, that make New Zealand or all our countries actually bound to any international laws. That means that they will make the laws outside of our countries, and then they will implement those laws inside of our countries, and we in our common law countries will have no power to stop them. So you have to get out of this spoken common law and into this written common law. Here, I'll read the comments here. I've got this. I've got Betty says, the church will be connected to the Vatican. Through kings. So the church will be connected to the Vatican through kings, and BlackRock in the USA through religious cults. And so then if you see, I've talked about this before, and so then anyway, common law is our, no, this is what our problem is. The ticket, okay, I'm going to talk about this common law that you're talking about, tikanga law. Tikanga law is okay, so they're all wanting to have absolute power in our countries, and the way that they've done it is previously to the 1688 Bill of Rights, everybody functioned in a common law that was unwritten, and the unwritten common law, that's actually what happened. All of our countries, England, Germany, Australia, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, all of our countries functioned under common law, but the evil religions and entities invaded our countries and took them over, and they were decapitating people and burning people and all of that. And the common law did not have enough protections to stop evil people. In a utopian world, just having a customary law would be a beautiful thing. But in the truth of the world, customary law is very dangerous, because you get people like these that want to take advantage, and they want the lands to be owned by them, and so it wasn't working. So that's why tikanga law, which is customary law in all our countries, was given with the protection of the 1688 Bill of Rights to protect the borders of New Zealand and the borders of their states, which forbids foreigners from governing over them. It's quite hard for me to explain it all, but the unwritten common law is weak. Do you understand that? It's very, very weak. It can be changed at the stroke of a pen. And this is how the governments are presently functioning in a common law construct. And that's why you're in so much trouble. Because under a common law construct, they have too much power. The 1688 Bill of Rights is the only document in the entire world that actually says it's from Almighty God's natural law, your ancient laws, your ancient customs, and you can actually take it to a court and get a declaration. And that is actually God's law working for you. People don't realize none of the laws that they have, United Nations laws, inalienable rights laws, none of them have got God's name on it. The only one that has God's name on it is the 1688 Will of Mary. And it says, under Almighty God, our common ancient law will be protected. And any attempts to remove our common law right, our customary right, any attempts at removing that will be stopped, that we can stop it by declaration. And so when they don't work within that, we can use it to get them gone. See, tikanga law can't get, yes. So, yes, Betty says all man-made laws are corrupt. Not the 1688 though. The 1688, what does the 1688 have? Is from God, and it has restriction on the Queen, restriction on Parliament, restriction on the courts, and restriction. It doesn't have any restriction on us. It says
Restrictions on the churches as well.
restrictions on the church, mostly restrictions on the churches, mostly, because the religions continuously have the goal that their religion should be the one that rules the world. That's how they think. They think my religion is the best one. Everybody that's not in it should perish. And the world's going to be a beautiful utopian place when only people of this religion continue to live in this world and everybody else is gone. So that's why we did get, yes, the religions are contaminated. And that's why we had, because you had the Catholic Bible, and that had murderous activities and heinous crimes and put us all in slavery. You had the Torah that protected their own people, but everybody else had to be stoned and, pay taxes and do all these things too. Then you had the Islamic Bible that also had all this. But then you had Almighty God of all of them, over all of them, which restricted everybody. And it was at that time in 1688 where you got a separation of church, you got a separation of the state, and you got a separation of the courts. It was all separated. And then they said Parliament would be the highest because we voted in. And then they said Parliament would have parliamentary sovereignty. But their parliamentary sovereignty was based on that they had to protect the common law right. It's not called right, it's called indubitable. It's called ancient indubitable law. Laws and liberties is what it is. That's customary. So Parliament had to do that. Well, when they've brought in the United Nations, you can go and look at the Cabinet Manual. Go and look at the Cabinet Manual and you will see a human rights or each of our countries, New Zealand, we've got 1990, which is attached to human. And under that, there's no restriction on them to behave in a certain way. And the churches suddenly found a way that they could have all power once again. And so this is the dilemma that we're in. And so the 1688 restricted the religions more than anybody else, actually. Didn't it, Jodie?
Yes.
Right. So what we're saying is that do you think what Josie White says, do you think Winston Peters has any regrets? Right. So Winston Peters is he used to be at listen, whenever I've listened to Winston Peters, he's been given an awfully hard time and they threw him out of Parliament. But everybody has to understand that when people go into Parliament, they don't have all power. If they got this, if they only have 5% of the vote, they do get to have a seat in Parliament, but they have to follow what the leading party orders them to do. Unfortunately, the leading party orders them to do things like they did to Trevor Mallard, that they know is going to destroy that person's career. And that person gets the blame. And the Parliament made a rule that if that person is ordered to do something by the dictator Parliament, they're not allowed to tell the public that they disagreed with it. Because if they tell the public that they disagreed with it, it's kind of like they're belittling the leadership and they're causing people to not trust the government. So they're not allowed to speak, shutting down free speech, you see. And so Winston Peters, I don't know who to trust, but this is what I will say about him. He wants one flag. He doesn't believe in two flags. All right, I'll answer that in a minute. So Winston Peters wants one flag, not two. And the flag that he wants is the one sitting here, and he wants it because it has our 1688 common law right, and it keeps us in the Commonwealth safe and sound. So that's what he wants. Secondly, Winston Peters does not want two names for our country. He wants one name for our country because I don't know if he knows it or not, but the parliamentarians are working in two jurisdictions. One jurisdiction, they're not restricted, and that's what's causing all the trouble because they've got too much power. And one jurisdiction is working under restricted so that they can function and have some kind of fake legitimacy. It is the epitome of a pretended title of the crown. That's what it is, pretended title. And so, no, does he have any regrets? I think, no, I don't think he does. I think he's worked very hard. He's done his best. He was ordered to do a lot of things and he got blamed for it, and it wasn't even him that did it. And I know because I've researched it. And so, yes, when you're swimming around in a world that you can't trust, I don't know, people get angry at me, but I trust he's probably the better of most of the evils. Now, I've been asked a question from here. So Kate, it was 1980. What was 1980? Hey?
That state happened in 1980.
All right. In New Zealand, they created an independent state in 1980. And I think it was the test case. I don't trust these common law groups. I've already told them. I think that they're deliberately set up to
I wrote about it in my thingy.
Right. So can I read it? Do you mind? I'll read it. So Maxine says, right now in New Zealand, there is what the government is doing. There is also these common law groups, and some, but not all, it appears, and I'm only surmising, she surmises, but I don't. I'm saying this is how it is. From the chats in other groups, some are hoping to work to secure the governance and be that chosen group of the 50% and take this supposed trust.
Yeah.
Yes. So what she's saying is certain groups in our countries, of all of our 5 common law countries, have made agreements with the United Nations that they will do some kind of a 50% deal to set up common law groups with private states throughout our countries, divide our countries into a series of private states where the United Nations is going to be permitted to set up, you know, their little independent states within our country. What's wrong, Maxine?
No, that was your bit. That's not what
That's my bet, not her bet. Yeah, that's mine. All right, it's not hers. No, okay, sorry. That's mine. I said that. But she did say that some of these groups have chosen to go in this 50% partnership with these evil people that want to do this. It is a fact that in 1980, this is a fact, an area in New Zealand managed to stop the government from doing something in their area by becoming an independent state. I'm not going to say that name, but I'll just say the name Josie, and I will say, yes, I have searched and seen what's going on, and I would say yes, Josie, to that question that you said without mentioning names. So then from the mid to late 80s onwards, these Americans, so after they did that, these Americans turned up in New Zealand talking all about the common law and spreading it all across our countries. It appears that they targeted the New Zealand native Maori. They did it in Australia. They're doing it very badly in Australia, but New Zealand's been the worst hit. They're doing it in Scotland. They're doing it in Ireland. And then I said that, but then she said that it's just interesting is all. And she says, I'm wondering if up until that little area in New Zealand managed to become a state and stop what the government of the day wanted to do there, suddenly it sent out a message around the world that, hey, New Zealand has this legal law that we can have independent states within their country. And then they have, I think that was the test case. They set up this independent state. They set up the argument, the chaos in the town. They created a situation that everybody in the town was against. They got all the hype. They got all the hype. And then they sent some very clever people in to teach them how to set up an independent state. They set up the independent state. They had their own passports. They had their own citizenship. They had their own stamps, their own bank, their own postal service. Completely independent from anybody else in New Zealand, completely. They could do anything they want, and even the police couldn't go in there and stop them. It was a very small area. Now they've started attempting to do that on a large scale. And I think that they've set up various independent states, but they have not announced them yet. But they're presently doing it. They had to have a lot of money due to the very professional passports and the stamps. It's not a cheap thing to have an independent state with your own passports that can be used to travel to other countries. So let's see what everybody's saying. Everybody's talking now because of you, Max. Kiwi English says, The traders are around every corner. Yep. Norm says, so you don't like common law, but you promote written common law. Can you explain the difference as you see it? Right, I'm going to come to you. The Nelson have stood up to the government. No, they haven't. Nelson is trying to create an independent state run by a religious cult. I'll tell you that right now. Nelson is the target. Wakatirangi says, good. Well, this is the deception, you see, because this is what you think. Well, when you have in the ancient times, all our countries were independent states. In the ancient times, before they created nations, all our countries were independent states. But what had happened was, the leaders of the independent states kept betraying the people. They keep selling out. They would create the independent state. You can look at, in New Zealand, we've got this, I was just looking on my video about this, who was that guy, Warren, of the Mormon church? He was called the hang on, I'll see if I can find it. FLDS cult. All right, Warren Jeffs. All right. Who knows Warren Jeffs? Now, he is a prime example of what happens when you set up, where are all the people? Can you, all right, there they are. Right, okay. Have you know this guy called Warren Jeffs? Who knows Warren Jeffs? Put your hand up. Do you know Warren Jeffs? Right, so I'm going to share Warren Jeffs, and this is, I'm not going to criticize Warren Jeffs, but it's an example of why independent states are dangerous for common law people. And they used to be really great because when his religious cult, right, can you see my screen share? All right. When his religious cult started out, it was his father that ran it. And his father was a very nice man, but his father ended up having 62 wives and hundreds of children. All the land and all the housing and all the money went into the hands of Warren Jeffs' father, who owned everything. And anybody who wanted to leave the cult left with nothing. Once you go into those independent states, everything sits in, no, you can't see. I'll have to read it to you because I'm not able to share on here because I don't know how to. But if you can do a double screen like I can, you can just Google Warren Jeffs. So if you Google Warren Jeffs, I can put it up here. So Google Warren Jeffs, Jef, and there's just recently a Netflix out about him. So he had an independent, his father had, he was it was called the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, is what they were called. Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, like similar to these people here, you see. So he set up, his father said, everyone was living scattered around the city. And he said, right, we're going to have an independent state. And he went and found this huge piece of land and he claimed it as an independent state, as their own citizens, as their own state, separate from the state of America or anything like that. That's what he did, just like they did it in New Zealand, right? And in the beginning, it was all beautiful and lovely and everybody loved him. But in the end, his father died. When his father died, he became a dictator. He ended up going to the court for charges of rape, child sexual assault, many other things. They extradited him from his independent state, and they did end up prosecuting him. But while he was in his independent state, he was able to function independently and do anything that he wanted. And the people that were with him in the independent state, if they wanted to leave and get out of it, they had to leave everything behind. So independent states are sometimes not as great as you want them to be. So he had grown up in Utah. Now, Utah, the entire state of Utah is owned. This is on, it's just on Wikipedia there, Betty. You can just Google Warren Jeffs and it tells you all about him. So he's just one of many religious cults. And he ended up getting life in prison, actually. Wow. I'm not going to put it all. He was on America's Most Wanted. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to read it, but he was prosecuted for incest. He was prosecuted for rape. He was prosecuted. And then all the money of the independent state sits in his hands. So that's one of the problems that you might have when you have an independent state. There's many problems of having an independent state. Another problem that you have is that when the leader of the independent state decides that he wants to sell your entire state to the United Nations or anybody else that will buy it, and this is what Richard Proser is talking about, you suddenly find that the land that you were living on, that you had invested 60 years in, that your children are born on and your children's children are born on, you suddenly find that it's gone. It's just gone out from underneath you. And your leader has done a runner and skipped country. And this is what has always, always happened with independent states. It happened in England. The whole of England was sold to the Jewish church and the Catholic Church. They owned the whole thing. And all the common law people were left in slavery because they couldn't leave their land, because that was where they lived, but they were under these rulers that now owned their land when they didn't even sell it. They didn't sell it to no one, but their leader did. So it's not a healthy thing to have common law, customary law without a restriction on the people that govern it. So that's when we brought in the written common law that said no foreigners can govern in this over your state. Do you understand that? So when you've got a state of Nelson, right? You have a state of Nelson, Warren Jeffs, and yes, to Kitty says that's exactly right. That's what happened in New Zealand. What had happened in New Zealand in 1835 is all the tribes were living through customary law, and the tribes themselves were happy. The three religions moved into New Zealand and got in the ear of the chiefs and gave them shiny things, and the chiefs started selling off the land. The people that were living on the land didn't even know that it was being done like it is being done in New Zealand now. That's what's going on in New Zealand now. That's why they wanted Aotearoa. And then suddenly the people woke up and their leader was gone, and they were left here with this new leader that they didn't like, who was doing horrible things to them, molesting them and beating them up and doing all sorts. And the people couldn't do it. And that was because of the common law. It was too weak to protect them. And there were no restrictions on their leaders. So you can have an independent state if you want to, but by God, you better restrict your leaders. And when you restrict your leaders, well, the Queen is very restricted, because the Queen is like, if she interferes with our common law, she's got to be, it gives us the way to remove her. So it said the Queen is the same as you. Parliament's the same as you. Nobody's above you and nobody's below you. Everybody's the same. And stop them from selling off your countries, because they'll sell your country. They sell everything that's not nailed down, and even what's nailed down, they'll sell it. You cannot stop them. And so that's why you can't have just common law that's not. You would have a state that made a certain set of laws and another state that made a certain set of laws, right? And the people in that state would follow those laws, and suddenly their dictator would change the law 5 minutes later, like they're doing now. Well, how are they able to change all the laws that they're changing presently? What they do is they cross the bridge to Aotearoa, this other place that's not New Zealand, and they do all their dictatorship stuff over there. And when they need legitimacy, they tippy-tap back to the written common law that restricts them, and then they function within there. Now, it's quite a little scheme that they've got going on here. They wrote the 1990 New Zealand Bill of Rights as an ordinary law, a subordinate law, a customary law, a law with no power.
Bill of
Okay.
Rights Act.
The Bill of Rights
Sorry.
Act. Thank you. It is called the Bill of Rights Act. All right? Bill of Rights Act. And under that, it had to be it got voted in by a select committee. It got voted in by the parliament, so it had parliamentary sovereignty, that it was a law made in New Zealand. And it's also a law that can be changed in New Zealand. It can be made in New Zealand and it can be changed. So you have power if you see that that law is not doing good to you, right? 3 years, then they placed that in the cabinet manual. So they said, we're going to have two. We're going to have this written common law of the 1688 Will and Mary, which is not an act, it's constitutional, right? Supreme. And that's got parliamentary restrictions. And then they said, and we're going to have this common law here as well, or customary law, or tikanga law. We're going to have both of them. It's going to be great, and we'll bridge them. 3 years later, the United Nations wrote the Human Rights Act and made hundreds of laws connected to it, of which New Zealanders didn't vote in. New Zealanders don't have any say what they put in there. New Zealanders don't have any say what they take out of there. You have no power. But they said, well, that's not New Zealand law. That's a human rights law, and it's not really in New Zealand law, so you've got no say over it. But then they bridged it onto the 1990 Act as a bridge. And then through the 1990 Act, which is bridged to the 1688 Will and Mary, they've got a whole little system here where when they want to do something to you, like lock you down in your country for 2 years and not let you go out of your house, when they want to do something like that, well, they go through the human rights where you have no power, bridged on to the 1990. And that's how they function in that little area where they're not restricted. And then they don't allow you to go to the court with your 1688 Will and Mary. And so you're being dictated to by a law that you never voted in the first place. So that's how they're able to do what they're doing.
I
Yeah.
just want to say it's not bridged yet from the Act to the Will and Mary, but this is where the
No, it's already
KII.
bridged. No, it's bridged. It is
it
bridged.
is bridged.
It's bridged because I've been reading all the court rulings and they have already bridged it. And yes, but they've already bridged it. But in another ruling, the court has said it has now changed its scope all by itself. What they were saying was when it was originally done, it was originally done as an ordinary, useless, no power, nothing law. But since all court cases, they will not allow you to put your Supreme Common Law through, and they only allow you to put through this pretended title of the Crown, it has become more powerful, and they're now calling it constitutional when it was never made constitutional in the first place. But it's got this bridge. Yes, she's kind of right there in one. The 1990 is surpassing your written common law presently, and the bridge that Jodie's talking about, Section 5 KII, that New Zealand will become bound to all international instruments. All right, wait for that, Norma, I'm going to come back to you. That New Zealand becomes bound by any international instruments, that still doesn't have power, but they've been sending it through the courts to try and give it the power. So it's not there yet.
Can that be fought later as being repugnant to our 1688 then? Are they bridging that? Because that's not constitutional.
We can do it now, but they're aiming to make our country's republic, and they've already removed all of our native people from their common law right and put them into customary law with no restriction. There's two laws. There's two common laws, right? There's customary law with no restriction, and there's customary law with restriction. Customary law with restriction is not a restriction on you. Customary law with restriction means that you get all your customaries that you want to have, but they are restricted, not you, because customary law must never be restricted. So he's saying, Norm's put it up. So it's the Human Rights Act, Section 5, subsection 2, KII, and it says New Zealand will be bound by any international instrument, right? And we want everybody to get interested in this, because when we went to the court, they said there's no public interest in what you're doing, Kate Floss. And so we want people to be interested so that we can say there is a public interest. Because I've gone to the court and I've said that that is repugnant, and we should never, ever have our country bound to an international law that we never wrote it. We never had any say what they were going to put in there. We never had any say what we want to take out of there. You have absolutely no power over that Human Rights Act, none whatsoever. So to have a section in it, KII, Section 5 KII, that says that you are bound to any international instrument, well, if they decide internationally that we're going to cut out the tongues of everybody that speaks against us, that's going to be the law that you have to follow, because they'll say, here, look, it's the law. You said you would do that. So it's incredibly dangerous, and America's pulled out of it, but England's got one. They've only done this in our 5 countries, nowhere else. Canada's not done it. America's not done it. All the islands have written protections, and denounced human rights. The only ones doing it is our our 5 countries, only us. So there's a bit of skullduggery going on here. Now what I was going to say, now I'll read what Maxine says. So the only reason, okay, Maxine is saying this, I'll read it to you. She says, the only reason I bring, and then I have to come back because I've got to answer also Not Norm, because Not Norm's got first in time is best in law. 1688 comes first, so I'm going to talk about that. And then I've got here, all right, well, and he says, just because there's no, it doesn't mean that it's not. The public weren't interested in bike helmets. Oh, I might put that. I know, but if there's a public interest, then my court case is free. And if there's no public interest, I have to pay for it. So if I get public interest in it, my court case is going to be free. And don't forget that we're on appeal and we're trying to get back in on the appeal because they struck me out. And so if there's public interest, I might increase my chances of the appeal. So Maxine says, the only reason I bring light to this specific area, what they managed to do, which was to make this independent state with their state, and then suddenly you have Win Miller here talking to Maori. So we had Russell J. Gould, Win Miller, and then there's another guy, an Indonesian guy. There's quite, you'll see quite around these common law people, there's often some Indonesians as well talking about this common law. The customary common law is just so dangerous for you. So they started this in 1980 when they made the independent state. The CIA, I believe, started sending out these people to teach this common law and telling you not to go to the courts, telling you to renounce and then get your independent state. Immediately you make your independent state, they can move in and talk with the leaders, offer them a couple of $1 million. The leaders bugger off and jump country, and you're left there with this independent. They just make it terrible for you. They did this to the Maori already. It's a classic thing. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. It's not new if you know your history. Now, suddenly they came here in 19, and other people here, and a massive movement began using this unwritten, I won't say common law, I will say a customary law. And it is simply to bring, we are bringing, she's saying, Maxine's saying, we want to bring light to a series of events that appear to have culminated within the same decade. Also, there is a very learned professor, and he actually happens to be an Islamist that has been through a few of the Commonwealth countries lecturing law. And he was here in New Zealand, and he did some pretty good lectures on the treaty. In the past 2 years, he's been lecturing on international law and Twayel, whatever that is. And what he speaks to consistently in his lectures to his students is how they are each sovereign states. Common law groups, customary law groups, are neither here nor there to me. Maxine's saying, and me too. I understand why many have joined this, as I nearly did also due to fear for my family. But we all have our journey, and she decided not to. So these common law groups, if you look, not the norm, absolutely. So just because, all right. Oh, not the norm, absolutely. All right, she said. Okay, I get what he's saying. Now, we're going to go back to Norm. Norm is saying first in time, best in law. Not if you become a republic. There's a bit of a problem with, all right. there's a bit of a problem because what's happening is they're flooding our people, our countries, with people that are not of the subject status and do not have. Now, okay, I'm just going to announce this today. I've announced it many times, but since we've got 10 people in looking, so I'll announce it again. Okay, now what do I have to announce? Something important. Very important about the states. What's it going to announce about the states, Maxine? Oh my God. States. Your independent states within your country. Oh, heck. I've missed it. All right, keep talking for a minute.
Being a republic?
Being a republic. Yeah, when you go to be a republic, all right, if you have enough, all right, okay. So, yeah, sovereign states. So each of the tribes, and just even like the City of London, think City of London, think Vatican, and each one of the tribes have an independent state that they own in their own right. And then if the evil people, maybe a religion, so there's many different religions and cults. Maybe a cult goes and meets with the leader and says, I'll buy that state from you, and he sells it and you can't stop him. And then what he does is moves his people all in there on a mass scale, and the people that are in there have no power over that. And then when he gets 2 or 3 of these states, if there's enough of these states, they become the majority. And then those people, that's what I wanted to tell you. All right, I've got it. I'll tell you now quickly. People of subject status, all white people, all not actually white people, but only because European are predominantly white, but all people from Europe, anybody that has subject status are forbidden from buying pure title land. We're not allowed to do it. When all the colonies started up, they originally started up because the religions had moved in and were decimating the native tribes and taking over their states and buying up their pure title land. But the Anglo people for hundreds of years, because of exactly that happening, what they did is they scooped up all the land, they made us all subjects, and they forbid all of us from buying native title land. And we were called people of subject status. And the reason why all of the 54 countries became Commonwealth countries was because they shipped all of us to those countries as human shields to protect them for a certain amount of time from the religions. China just closed its doors. China closed its doors for 200 years to stop these religions coming in and buying up their independent states. And Britain, the way that they dealt with that was they made all of us subjects and forbid us from buying pure title land. We could only ever buy paper title land. And then when they shipped us to all of these countries, now here's what's happening at the moment. This is what's happening at the moment. Those tribes kept their independent states, and when they left the Queen and they set up this fake place, fake construct called Aotearoa, some but not all, and in my conspiracy theory, because I'm not sure about everything, but some of the tribes went into this construct of Aotearoa and removed their subject status. They didn't want to be subjects because they wanted to trade in pure title land, right? And what is the danger here when you do that? It sounds like fun, but the danger is that when your state is no longer protected under your 1688 Bill of Rights and no longer protected by people that are of subject status. They've just done it in New Zealand. An Islamic group bought 50,000 acres of New Zealand land. And those people are not of subject status, and they are permitted to buy pure title land. See, I'm not allowed to buy your pure title land, but anybody that is not of subject status is entitled to buy pure title land. And when they buy the pure title land and they own a large tract, they can do exactly what was done in New Zealand. They can set up an independent state with their own passport, their own citizenship, their own court, their own everything, mosques. And they even can bring people into the country through that independent state and give them citizenship in that state. So, and then if you get enough of those, so our countries, our 5 countries, all people were made subjects. And when anybody wanted to come into New Zealand, they had to announce themselves a subject status. They had to take on the subject status and go under the Queen. It wasn't because the Queen was to have power, but it was so that they were not allowed to buy the pure title native land from our natives that own it. That's why, because what had happened in 1835 is the missionaries had brought up the entire country in its pure title state. But because they were subjects, the Queen said, no, you're not going to do that. And she came in and took all that land back from them. Some of it, and then the Maoris got given certain areas, only enough that they could manage in their independent state and their native. So it was no good giving. If a tribe had only 1,000 people and you gave them 30,000 acres, they weren't able to manage it. And not being able to manage it, it became vulnerable to outside entities stealing it from them. So they downsized it according to the size of their tribe. And they said, you're going to have this independent state, but it's going to be small and manageable for you. We're not going to give you this great big piece that you can't manage. So they allocated the certain amount to each of the tribes. And then the rest of it all come under the Queen to be sold and traded and all that under people of subject status. So that's why they, yes, dear.
I just want to know, so what tribe sold out the New Zealand to the Islamics?
You know what?
What
I
tribe?
haven't got time to research it, but
I wonder.
we're going to have to go there. First, we've got to get our...
They won't be very
Arms
popular,
back.
that's for sure.
I actually don't think it's on...
It could be a corporation that did it. I mean, there's a lot of corporations that own that much amount of land.
Yeah.
It may not be a tribe possible.
But a pure title, isn't it?
We don't know that it
It's
is.
like-
I'm just saying that is one of the possibilities that I haven't
Right.
saying that it is. But what I'm saying is that they're deceiving because a lot of our native people didn't understand the meaning of having their independent states. They don't really know about most. Even I, until a few months ago, didn't know that people of subject status can't buy pure title land. Even I didn't know that. And and then it kind of gelled to me, why did 54 countries get all these subject status people to go there to protect them and build their infrastructure? Why us? Why wasn't it, someone else? And now I know why. It was because we weren't allowed to buy. Even if we met with an Indigenous person and we bought their pure title land, the Queen would take it off us. We're not allowed to own it. But what they've clued on, see, they've learned now in the 1800s, they learned from the last time, next time when we get their pure title land, we're going to sell it to people that are not of subject status. And the Queen ain't going to be able to take it back and give it back to the natives like she did last time. So you won't get it back again. If you ever want to sell your land, if you own a pure title land and you ever want to sell it, the only people you should sell it to is people of subject status. And if they're not subject status, then you must have it in your, eh?
I said you could wave that land goodbye.
You ain't going to get it back like you did last time. The New Zealand Maori, you were all so lucky that all the people...
I have to say that you have to remember that none of us have known this. I didn't, and maybe some of these groups did, but up until what? March this year? I mean, how many people on this chat knew all this shit? It's like, all I knew as far as my land went, we couldn't loan on it. We could only, we had to get an occupation in order to build on it. There were so many restrictions in Māori land and it didn't seem fair. And now, because of Kate and what we've been researching, I get that. But as far as selling, the fact that it was pure title, like my ancestors, well, a couple of them might have, but the majority, I've got to go back to a meeting. I'll be up there in August, and Kate goes, "You need to tell this." Well, hello. It's like you've got people in your whānau that come from addiction. So good luck with that. You got people that have no concept, that just want to get on with living their life as we used to. So you've got all these, and then possibly some of my relatives will be in some of these groups. How are you going to, how do you bring a whole bunch of people together? How do you get a group of people when even in Māori PM's group, you cannot get a group of these people to agree? So, like, we're working away, and this knowledge has been amazing.
Yeah.
But we're really at the same place, trying to do the same thing with what we have. So, yeah. Jordan?
We have, what she's saying is we can't, even if we do find out that somebody sold large tracts of land and stuff like that, even if we find out that the tribes have done that, the people that have manipulated our native people are so clever. None of us knew this. None of us, it's only very recent that we've come to discover this. Some of the very high up leaders, they knew, although did they really know everything? They have put, a lot of the people that are running our tribes are not actually proper native to our tribes. That's what Richard Proser was saying. He was saying those people that are making all these decisions for our natives, they're not even brown. They're white. They've got native Maori names, but they're white, and they've got ancestries from America or from other countries that are not from here, and they're the ones leading it. So we can't really blame.
I think too. I think people, if you take your eye and move out, take the focus out, and just remember, everyone knows about the whole fucking, the history of Freemasonry and all that crap. It's like we're up against a machine that has been going for centuries. It's like that's it. So bringing it down to a non-group like you and bringing it right down, and then everyone busy pointing fingers at each other and blaming and wanting retribution is not. That's why they are able to do what they do, and we're stuck in the same circle century after century, after generation after generation. It's not until you learn to bring the focus out and then learn to play their game the way they play it, because everything I've researched, they actually fucking tell you what they do and they tell you how they do it. And I did have my earphones on last night listening to the book. You can actually get the Freemasonry book on whatchamacallit, when you can just listen to it as ironing and
Audio.
it's painful. Yeah, you can get that, but it's like I thought to myself, well, I have a massive belief in a power beyond myself, and I'm like, this is just too big, and it's evil listening to that crap. So I'll take my chances, do what we can do, and hopefully this whole spiritual thing is real and someone's going to save us.
Because she's saying, what she's saying is we're gonna change track, okay? We were going down this path, and now we're just gonna go a different way, you know? And we're gonna try and explain to people what we're trying to tell them. And then if we think that they have a good understanding of what we're trying to tell them, and then they still want to go on that path, you know, just leave them. Okay. So our one's simple. So but we have to, most of the people that are involved with all these common law groups, they just don't know. And so that's, you know, it's very, you can see why they join them, but they just don't know. But we're in a lot of trouble. So here's what Te Kiti says. They did that in Purira Forest. They sold a huge acreage to the Chinese, Crayford's Farm. They didn't want to sell to the local iwi. Yes, now this is a very important thing. Here's the, yes, dear.
That Crayford Farms, the Māori had the money to buy that Crayford Farms back. Then the government decided that they'll triple it. So where it might have been going for 100,000, they tripled it to maybe 400,000. Māori had the money to buy that back.
What area is it?
Here, Tikuri, Maniapoto.
Is that in the north?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something interesting about what Sharon has just said, and this is a fact. She said that they put this land up. They said, because they have to go public, right? They put the land up. They said, this land's going to be for sale. And then, all right, King Country, she says. And then I'm going to tell you something really interesting here. And then the New Zealand local native Maori group said that they would buy it. Now, here's something interesting. We Anglo people that are of subject status, we're not allowed to buy pure land, but natives who own pure land are allowed to buy it amongst themselves. So if a Maori wants to buy a pure title land from another Maori, they can. They can exchange their lots. And so that's a little sweet thing that they got to keep. By us, we Anglo people didn't get to keep that, but the Maori got to keep that little special thing because of us. And so that's exactly right. The Maori put up the money and they said, hey, we're going to buy it. The government said they want to get it out from under the Queen, so they tripled the price of the land and then they sold it to Chinese. I don't think that they were expecting for the Maori to put up their hand and say, I've got money, I want to buy that money, I want to buy that land.
Right.
Any land that's sold to Chinese, any land that's sold to America, any land that's sold to Indonesians, any land that's sold to Middle Eastern people, probably even Ukrainians, any land in its pure title that is sold to them, for any of the tribes that have left the construct of New Zealand and gone into the construct of this fake place called Aotearoa, which means they've left their subject status. Any of those that have done that then take their land and sell it in its pure title to any of those people, that land is no longer part of New Zealand. It's gone. And you can't get it back. Unless you all click onto it and you get a government that comes in and says it was all fraudulent and stops it. So-
Creeper Farms actually belonged to a white fella who wanted to get out of farming, and this was way before the lockdowns and everything, way before. I think it was 3 or 4 years before we had the lockdowns in 2020. But the white guy that sold it must have known what was coming, so he wanted to sell it. He sold it to the government. It wasn't a Māori to Māori, it was a white person to Māori. Māori offered to buy it back, but Chinese stepped in. The Chinese stepped in and bought it for triple the amount. And the government let it go.
So that'd be
And-
fraudulent. So
And
that's-
I always thought that Māori have right of purchase, first right of purchase. Obviously not. And in the native laws, they do. They had first right of purchase.
As I've always said, I do believe that there is a round table of New Zealand Maori chiefs that make the decisions. They have got a seal, and it's up to them. It's not up to you. And this is the problem with independent states as well, because an independent state, you still have to have a leader. If you want to have an independent state with your own passport, your own citizenship, your own stamps, if you want to have that, you have to have a central leader that is the representative of that independent state. And it's them that you can't trust because they turn. Man is corrupt. Now, I'll just read what they say. Now, this, okay, so they did watch Moana Jackson. Moana Jackson was the start of all this. He is the one that rewrote the treaty, and in 1975, the New Zealand Maori renounced the Queen and they renounced their subject status. And that was done by Moana Jackson, and he's a Catholic, all done by Catholics. Because they're all, if you're international people...
So there was Manuka. Wasn't it Henare Manuka?
Also another one, Moana Jackson, Manuka Hanari, Kafaru, what's his name? Eddie Drury, Mason Drury, Willie Jackson, somebody Hawke. Oh, there's a few more in there. They all did it together, and him. So if you look at the world leaders, who have you got in your world leaders that you want to go and look at your world leaders? There's just a recent one, but I haven't done the picture. So there's Joe Biden, and he's a Catholic. I've done this before, but I'll do it again. He's a Catholic, right? And then there's Justin Trudeau, and he's a Catholic, all right? And then there's Dan Andrews, he's a Catholic. And then there's Boris Johnson, he's a Catholic. And then you've got the head of the human rights. I would say Jewish. I'm just going to dump all the religious cults into Jewish. So he's Jewish, and then you've got his wife, and she's Jewish. They're the head of the Human Rights Commission that function between Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, Australia, New Zealand. They all function together. And then you've got her, she's a Quaker, so in Jewish. And then you've got Mary, she's Catholic with the Muslims. And then you've got the Latter-day Saints who have teamed up with the Muslims. And what they've clued on, they turned our Maori king into a Catholic. And who else have we got there? So what they're doing, what they learned, see, originally all these countries, the Catholics and the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons and all the Jewish groups went to all of these countries and bought up all the lands in its pure title, and the Queen came in and stopped all of that and placed human shields of subject status to go in and protect those lands. That's what happened. And then the tribes got some independent states, but they learned their lesson. The religions learned their lesson, and this time around, they've realized, go and get the native tribes, buy up all their pure title land, but don't let anyone that's not of subject status, don't let anyone that's subject status buy it. You see, and then so Crafers, it doesn't matter. She said Crafers gifted back some of the areas of significance for Rere'ahu, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because if Chinese people have got even 1 acre of your pure title land, even if they've got one tiny little square, it can be as square as big as a house. If they own it in its pure title form, they can set up an independent state within your country and do what they want in it. So it doesn't matter that they've gifted you a little bit back. They're happy to do that because they got their pure title land in your country. First right of refusal is what it's called. They should offer you first, but what I'm thinking is that you've got leaders that have sold you out. The top leaders that are in control of all of, you've got your independent tribes, but then you've also got top leaders in the background that make decisions for you as a whole. And it's them that have sold out and are allowing this, and you don't have power over them doing it. The huge group of them was Hugh Pharaoh because they got a huge settlement. Hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of acres of land, and so they got a lot out of it. Did they know that they were going to lose independent states later? Did they know that the United Nations would move in as a 50% partner of New Zealand? Did they know that? I would like to think that they did not know. I mean, how could you possibly know all of that? Back in the time, there were no computers. At that time when all this happened to Kafaru, there were no computers. They were still using, they were still doing handwritten documents. So the computer that they had was there were no cell phones, YouTubes, Google. All of that didn't exist in the 1970s. So would they have known all of this? I would suspect that they probably, although they still would have had the memories.
I would possibly say that they would have known there was something not right about it.
Yeah, I said
You can't, you cannot not know that.
Well,
And
I
you
know
just say, and then
wasn't it? It was a
and then
hybrid
there were those certain Māori influences that did travel overseas to meet with some of these people. So did they know? I don't know, but I know that a couple of those tribes have got the biggest, have managed to build their wealth, something wicked. And lucky for me that one of my children whakapapa to them, and I managed to get quite a substantial operation done. But in saying that, is that worth it for what we're facing now? I don't think so. I don't think that's worth it.
I think the case at the time, like it was quite high profile, like the Pray for Farms. New Zealanders were aware of it because it was going to create a precedent of having China come in and buy up farmland, and that was the Crayford Farm, wasn't it? And there was a big talk about it. The Overseas Investment Office had to sign this off. It was quite a big thing, and then the ministers had to approve it. So it kind of opened up the door, I guess. That was set a precedent for international foreigners coming in to buy up, as you say, the pure title. We didn't know it was pure title at that point. We just thought they were just coming in to buy up the farms, and that in itself wasn't good for New Zealanders. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we don't know that the Kramer farm was sold in its pure title state. We don't really know if it was or if it wasn't, or if they were clever enough. But I'm just saying that this is the things that can be happening if you, why are they suddenly, New Zealand Maori owned, this is the truth, New Zealand Maori owned 100% of the country. The whole country belongs to them. Same thing in Australia. The whole country belongs to the Aboriginals. You don't own it. But what you get is they get given enough that their tribe can manage, and then you get to utilize all of the rest of the land. You get to utilize it. And now where was I saying about that? So that's what I'm saying is, why now the New Zealand Maori had 100% ownership of all, but they had a lot of the country they had to share. They shared it. Think of it like that. They shared it, but they still owned it, all right? But now they're going into a 50% partnership under the IAI, where the United Nations owns 50% and New Zealand Maori are going to own 50%. You've got to think, you had 100% and now they're offering you 50%. You see? So you've got to use your noggin, people.
And then you get to the refugees and you have to share with them, because now Māori's become refugee status. You have to share with them, which only makes it 24.
They made New Zealand Maori refugee status when they put them into the Indigenous rights, and they got the New Zealand Maori to sign up to all of these agreements. And they've got in their AI law, they've got a partnership, a 50% partnership with the United Nations as their partner. It's not the Queen that's the partner. It's not us that's the partner. It's a 50% partnership with the United Nations is what you've got. And the Maori now, under that partnership, if they want to do anything in their independent state, they've signed an agreement that they have to check first with the other Indigenous people that are living in New Zealand. So that's all the refugees and things. So they've got to check with them before they can do anything in their independent state. Whereas before, they didn't need to check with no one because it was theirs, only theirs, and there was no freaking partnership with no one. So now here I've got to go to the groups to see what they say. So the first right of refusal, but the first right of refusal may be going to those higher up people. There was a huge time. All right, we're going to get on to the towers. Everyone wants to. Those clowns sitting on Te Rawara, yeah. Hi, Kate. Tananga Oti Rawara is what I meant, not my tribe. Oh, can you explain a little bit, Hemi? Turananga Oti Rawara is what I meant, not my tribe. Those clowns sitting on. Oh,
Chirinanga are what?
he says, this is what he says. I'm not quite understanding him. He says,
Te Arawa.
first sentence he
Te
says, those clowns sitting on Te Rawa. And then he says, hi, Kate. Te Rananga Oti Rawa is what I meant, not my tribe. So I'm not sure what he means.
Chirinanga o Te Arawa.
Yeah. Now I think he's talking about Te Arawa, so the nose, top of the nose.
Anyway, sometimes things. So I've got a good question here from Not Norm. Not Norm says, if the Maori take on subject status, does that mean that they give up their ability to buy native title? Right, I'm going to tell you something really interesting here. And then we've got another question that says, Ngā Tama Taua. Is that the Taua that we're talking about down the south there, Maxine? Is that Ngāti Taua? Right. Going to tell you some interesting things.
Different.
Right. We've got 5 important documents that were created in New Zealand, right? And I'm just going to reveal it because I don't want to live in secret, so I'm just going to tell you what they are. In 1841, the first Queen Victoria document was created for New Zealand. And it is at this time because they had set up Maori parliaments, they had set up Maori little courts all over New Zealand, all right? And because when the Queen came in, they were only allowed to make laws for the Anglo people. They weren't allowed to make laws in regards to your country. They weren't allowed to make laws in regards to your people, but they were allowed to make laws to govern over the Anglo people. That is a fact, number 1. But also fact number 2, they then set up little courts all over New Zealand in each area where you had tribes. And on those courts, they placed, the whakaputanga, right? We just leave the whakaputanga just for a minute, or I'll come back to it, all right? But let's just be here for a minute. Go back to there in a minute. Right. Everybody should understand that I'm just bullshit, Kate Floss, and everything that I said has come off Wikipedia, and some of it will be right and some of it will be wrong. I try to get it as right as what I possibly can, but this is how I see it through my eyes. So if I get something wrong, don't come back and abuse me. This is just how I'm seeing it, all right? To the best of my knowledge. All right. So when the British came in, of course, they have no power in your country. You can't give away the power of your country. You simply cannot do it. And what they were able to do was to help the natives in the country to set up courts, which is what they did all over New Zealand. Now, all of those courts had New Zealand native leaders who were in charge of those courts. And anything that they wanted to do, they had to check with these native leaders that were educated. Had educated them for many years beforehand. And the first document that came out in 1841 was the Queen Victoria number 1. On that Queen Victoria number 1 was a series of laws to say that each district would be able to set up some laws and do these things to create order within the country. The next one is going to be quite a surprise for you all. There was no constitution in New Zealand. The top Maori leader of the time was Tamati Wakanene, and there were 2 others. They ended up getting King Potato and another one, but you know, I can't tell you exactly everything, but there were 3 kings in the north, right? There were 3. One of them was Tamati Wakanene, and a ship came to New Zealand called the St. Pauli, and it had only German settlers. And those German people, on the time that they hit New Zealand, were made subjects on the day that they arrived in New Zealand, and they were made special subjects under special status of Queen Victoria, and they were Queen Victoria number 2. And on that document, it said that they were not of alien status in New Zealand. Yeah. And then the next person to go was Tamati Wakanene, who made himself a subject. And I think that there's a person that says, does that mean they give up their ability to buy native title? Her Majesty the Queen gave up her all pure title of all Commonwealth lands sits in the hands of the Queen, and she gives back paper titles to all of us, except for the states that the individual tribes were given to care for, that they could manage. That stayed with them. Whenever we bought land, we had to buy a paper title. And immediately we bought that paper title, and the pure title stayed with the Queen, right? If at some point the New Zealand Maori said, I want all that land back, then the person that bought the paper title, me, let's say me, I bought it, then I would say, I want to sell this. The Queen would buy it back in its paper title. Then she would say to the Maori, you want this land? I'm going to give it back to you in your pure title. They would, and this is how I think Aotearoa was created. Then they buy it back in the pure title. Then they, in their own volition, then they sell it to somebody else, and they hold the pure title, not the Queen. And there's quite a bit of, they probably are thinking that this is a good thing, but it's quite a long story. But then they hold it. Now, then those new people that buy it in a paper title from that elite Maori group, let's say the Aotearoa group, and then all lease monies from that land goes to that Aotearoan group, rather than going into the Queen's pot, all right? So the St. Pauli ship arrived, and they immediately were made subjects. And then Tamati Wakanene made himself a subject, and we have not seen his document. See, I've got my document. So my document, I'm from the St. Pauli ship, a descendant. So my document is the proper document of mine, right? So my document, why was I talking? My document is here, right? It's my document, Queen Victoria number 2, all right? It's got all the names of the people that were on that trust, and they were made subjects on a trust at a time when New Zealand didn't really have a government set up yet. And that was done in 1843 in June. Tamati Wakanene did his in 1847, and I'm thinking that he gave up his right to pure title land, just like the Queen, and he became a yes from Patu 1, yeah. So, all right, let me keep going. I think that he gave up he became, I believe that he became the waka. He became exactly, because they mirror, he became like the queen. All the pure title went into his body. But because he was a subject, he was no longer allowed to trade in pure title land, which kept your land safe with him. And then I think there's something going on here with him, the same that went on with the Queen, some kind of thing on. But so his papers I can't find. I'm searching. I don't mind telling you. It's a bit of a secret. I don't know. I don't know if it's a secret or not. But anyway, it's not a secret anymore, Maxine. And so then, so he got one. Now, after him came another document in 1858 where another group of people, but on theirs is different. Theirs just gives them naturalization. It was not a direct order from the Majesty. It was just from the governor. 1852 came the Constitution. 1858 came just naturalization. Then in 1865, a new one came, and it stated on there, the 1865 native rights, that New Zealand Maori would all be subjects. But it's interesting, and then it said all New Zealand will come under the protections of the Queen's law. But then it had a separate section for the Maori, and it said that all their customary lands would stay in their hands. So that, not Norm says, if the Maori are subjects, do they lose their ability to buy native title? And I'm going to say no, because when they become subjects, they had a clause put in this. And then in 1908, they did another separate one that totally removed, that totally gave them absolute power over their own customary lands. So they got a double dippy. They got a subject status, but they did not get forbidden to purchase pure title land within their own group, but it would forbid them from buying, I think it will forbid them from buying pure title land in Australia or in Canada, but not forbid them within their own customary lands within their own country. So I think that's how they did it all, something like that. And then, okay, they hold iwi control as far as I can see, Tararau. It's true, but we are all just the lowly people, but we've got to keep a check on what they're doing. I don't know how we're going to deal with this. I'm just saying this. I'm only saying this is how I'm seeing it. Jodie wants to talk.
I just want to go back to Norm and about the subject status. With these common law groups coming in now, and they're sort of asking them to renounce their subject status, I think that's where he's at. He's asking about, reframe that question again that Norm asked.
So he says, if Maori take on subject status, does that mean they give up the ability to buy native title?
Right.
And I'm saying no because of the 1908 declaratory judgment, 1908 Native Rights Act, which says
that they had subject status, but what if they renounce that subject status?
That's what they've done.
Yeah.
They've renounced it.
Yeah. And then they can buy pure title, and then they can sell it off.
I
think
they were not permitted to, they might not have been permitted to buy the pure title. I think each tribe got their pure title and they were not allowed to buy in each other's state. But we did just recently have a court case where a bunch of the northern tribes all went to the court and asked for one tribe to be the owner of the states of all the other tribes. They wanted to make one big state. And the court said no, because the
Yeah.
customary, yeah, because of the customary law being different in each state. But
area.
it would have given them too much power. See, if you get people buying up these states, so we're not quite sure. I can't say that. So I can't say that these people have been buying up pure title land, but I am saying that they are encouraging our native people to leave their subject status, leave the Queen, be a republic, go into a 50% partnership with the United Nations. And I'm saying that your pure title land is protected forever, but if you do that, then your pure title will be in the hands of your leaders, who may be good leaders at the moment that would not sell its pure title. But what if in the future he decides that he wants to sell the pure title? So someone says, hey, here's $1 trillion, they can't be trusted. Yes, Maxine. Your microphone's not on. Do you want to talk, Maxine? Are you talking? Did you put your hand up?
No,
I saw your hand go up.
oh, no. No, I was saying I want some cream when my son goes to the supermarket.
Lady.
Well, I'm just, so no, Kate had it right. All right, not Norm says I've got it right. So when you got your 1908, which is that, no, I don't know what I got right, but he said I got something right. What did I get right? No. Something.
No, you got it right. I was, yeah, I didn't quite, maybe it was my understanding. Yeah.
In the 1908, you had a thing and it says every title to or interest in land over which the native title has not been extinguished shall be determined according to the ancient custom and usage of the Maori people, so far as the same can be ascertained. So I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I think you can trade amongst tribes, or you must be able to do something. I'm not because I'm not Maori, obviously, so I don't know everything. But it just says here that where you have a state, you can do anything that you want with it according to your ancient customs. Whereas in the other area of New Zealand, where all the subjects live in the fake construct, we live in kind of a false construct. In there, we're not allowed to. We have to function according to the laws and everything that are set up. But we do have our 1688, which does protect us, and we have our restrictions on Parliament and things like that. So it's you look at the it does say that in the section 71 of the old constitution that they removed, it did say that you only allowed to do things within your state that are not repugnant to the Queen's written common law. So you still you couldn't go around chopping off heads and eating people or, hurting people. You couldn't do that. But you could live according to your customs, and you didn't have to have, I suppose, if you wanted to ride a bike on your independent state, you could without a license. And you could do a lot of those things. I don't know. So that's about kind of where we're at. That we're saying that we're living in we're going to be finishing up now because it's been a long time. think about your questions, and we had about 15 viewers today, which is more than we've ever had. And I just want everybody to kind of think about that. Think about what we've been talking about. Know that what I've been saying is not 100%, and we still are walking through very shady waters here. So we're
Putting
saying,
pieces of the puzzle together.
eh?
Putting your pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, so we're still doing that. So we're not done yet. And we know that the Ngāti Toa tribe, the Ngāti Tamatoa tribe is very connected. The Ngāti Toa tribe, together with Te Raupara, together with the people of the descendants of the St. Pauli, which is all the Nelson area, and the Port Nicholson block, and Tamati Wakanene's group, we've all got some kind of thing going on. We've got something going on. And so we're kind of just, talking together and trying to figure out what's going on in New Zealand and trying to alert everybody to this issue of the common law groups trying to get states within states and what they're all up to, and just trying to decide what's right for us as a country, and to think about our future descendants and what's going all on. And so we'll all come back on, I think. We've got to get our appeal in by next week, don't we? And remember that the main law, we'll finish up with this, the main law that we're interested in is the Human Rights Act, Section 5, KII, that says New Zealand will be bound to any and every international instrument. And that can be any law. It's just an insane thing to have. And so this is something that we can all work on together. We don't have to, let's not fight about land. Let's talk about protecting the borders of our country, protecting the independent states that you own. All of you need to gather up your tribes, gather up your waka, and look at what's going on with your independent states, and be careful of this thing called Aotearoa. They want us all to go into this place called Aotearoa, which doesn't have your written protections that subject status has. So we're all going to be talking about it. So has anybody got any questions you want to ask or say anything before we go? No? All right. I don't think there's any. All right. So we're going to see you later, and we'll be back here. And we're going to be back here next week to tell you what happened in our appeal that we're getting in the court. All right. And if you've got any things that you want to tell me, you can come and tell us. See you later. That's the end of YouTube.
Thanks, Kate.